Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today we are looking at the Talon Class Scout. So, starting off here on uh, Daystrom's website, I did want to bring up the picture because it is interesting to note the size difference here. We have a Type 10 shuttle, and this comes from. Shoot. Trying to remember the name of the movie, one of the Next Generation movies, and of course, my mind is failing on this one. Uh, but we have data in in the Talon Scout, which obviously is a bigger ship because these were getting lined up to dock, so that way Picard and Worf could actually try and figure out what was going awry with data. So, getting into our specs in our write up here for the Talon class Scout, we do have a small write up. The Scout ship was intended to be a slightly smaller, lighter armed, and considerably faster counterpart to the Danube class runabout. The design is less modular than the Danube. Starfleet wanted a vessel which would be easier to build and maintain. It is optimized for a low level planetary survey or scientific mission, but can act as a personal or light cargo transport if needed. In a combat mission, the Scout can act as a heavy fighter and or interceptor. It has the speed and weaponry to take on most fighters, although its size makes it less than ideal for this role. Alternatively, the Scout can launch hit and run attacks on smaller ships with a fair chance of survival. The Scout is a relatively conventional design. The cockpit is in the forward section, just above and behind the navigational deflector. The nacelles are semi conformal into the body, a measure reminiscent to the Defiant design. There is a docking latch access on the underside or the ventral, which fits any standard adapter. These craft have seen relatively limited service. In general, most operators prefer the flexibility role of the Danube class, and there have been comparably little interest in the less capable competitor. One example of this type did serve with the operation to relocate the Baku people, um, and this comes all from, and I'm hoping it's going to tell us, insurrection. So, um, you know, another one of those ships that for me works really well because I like the smaller ships, and I do realize that I'm probably one of the minorities because I always like this stuff in the role playing aspect of I can just have a couple people there, um, just kind of taking it for what it is. So, looking at what we have known from Daystrom, this is a scout ship. Roughly 380 have been built in all, although we've lost about 105. This was done in commissioned in 2374 all the way up to present. Has a length of 24.4 meters, a beam of 13.8 meters, and a height of 5 meters, giving it one deck. This comes in at a whopping 85.7 metric tons. Has a crew of one, has four Type 5 phaser arrays and two micro photon torpedo tubes with about 30 rounds. Again, lending itself to being a possible interceptor, which I do like this thought because the Federation always trying to be more of a organization for peace and exploration and so on and so forth, which I think is a big reason why we never truly see in the original series and so on and so forth because we're always doing exploration and all that, but we don't typically see kind of like spacecraft carriers. So thinking of it in that regard, um, we are getting those with some of the newer designs that are out there. They're really meant to go up against more conflicts with, say, the Borg during the Dominion War, and any other adversary that might be out there. So I could understand that we may have some fleets that are very much like what we have in today's day and age, where you have an aircraft carrier, some frigates, and other support craft around it. Indeed, I got a cat that's being curious around all my Legos. But in that sense, yes, you're going to have a couple fleets that are out there, commanded by an admiral, captain, captained, captained by different captains and other officers to get them ranked up in a controlled environment. Come on over here, kitten, and the like. But all in all, being relatively few, to see it in that regard. All right. So continuing on here, our defense systems, we do have standard shield system with a total capacity for 27,000 terajoules. Light duranium titanium single hull, a low level structural integrity field. Our normal warp cruise speed is 5, a maximum warp capacity for 6, and our maximum rated is warp 8 for about 12 hours. Uh, we have a beam firepower being rated for how Daystrom rates everything at about a 10, torpedo firepower of 20, weapon range and accuracy of a 25, shield strength is a 10, hull armor is a 3.13, speed is 535, and combat maneuverability would be 17,200, giving it an overall strength index of a 75 and a diplomatic capability of 2. So, yes, we could use this as a small craft, saying that we could do some diplomatic missions with it. So, this does lend itself in a Starfleet universe to say we could have a small crew on here with low ranking officers managing the ship. Um, a great way to get experience for up and coming officers, getting them prepared for bigger ships and the like. All right, we do have an expected hull life of 70 years. At the moment that this is all being seen, minor and standard refits are going to be at 0 years, and major refit every 10 years. So, figuring every 10 years, we're going to bring this in, give a complete total overhaul of it, and go from there. Uh, we'll have to see how that works. Movie wise, I think this is just a one off ship to throw in here. But as far as role playing games, I think this does have a lot of availability because, like I said, you can have a small crew on here. They have a crew listed of one, and I think I kind of skimmed over that because that's what we see in Insurrection. We have data handling everything, but that's not really going to be the best kind of analysis of this because when you really look at data and the fact that he doesn't really require sleep, it's not like you're running 3 shifts. He can be awake at all hours of the day. So if he's doing a prolonged scouting mission for a couple months, I mean, he could be awake and going for a couple months straight without needing the downtime. Where if you're running this as a crewed vessel, you might want to have a couple people on board. So just throwing that out there because there's different circumstances that kind of work at this. Like I said, most notably because we have someone that is capable of being awake almost all day and all night and doesn't really need to sleep. All right, let's get into our D6 stats. Okay, so looking at the Talon class here, this is a type, a scout ship type. It's Starfighter scale. So again, at 24.36 meters. So this is a little different. 16.26 meters wide and 6.31 meters as my phone is talking to me. And now they're saying this comes in at 15.7 metric tons. So there is a big discrepancy here. I don't know how you really want to list this. This is a size 2 class starship. All right. This would be more of a space transports for skill base. I'm taking it from the. Oh, you're going after my sword. Would you leave my sword alone? What are you going after my sword for? That cat. Okay. We do have an autopilot of a 3D plus one. I'm all kind of flustered here because I get a kitty cat just being all obnoxious in my Legos. Um, which means that it is a little bit above our galactic standard of 2D. They do have listed as a crew of 4, which does make a little bit more sense, like I was saying, because when you have data and he can be awake at all hours of the day, and he doesn't get tired or whatever else, you know, you're going to need a couple more people here. And we do have enough room for passengers of 10. So, again, uh, not too bad. Now, this is where things get kind of funny because cargo capacity is 1,250 metric tons, and being something that only weighs in at 15.7, I would say we're a little off here. Um, I don't, it's funny just to look at it. You have a 15-ton vessel that can carry almost 10 times its weight. Um, you know, uh, it's a game, so we'll just let it go. I'm not too concerned about the actual mass in that. I think the cargo capacity is a little on the high side. I could see maybe 125 metric tons worth of cargo being on par with, say, like the Millennium Falcon, being almost that same size ish. Um, but I think this is a little overboard. All right, we do have consumables for about 2 months. Now, the warp drive is significantly slower here because remember, we were at a 5 for our normal cruise, a 6 for our standard, or for our max, and max rated was 8. They have a warp drive of 1.5. A maximum warp would be 3, and max rated for 5 at 24 hours. Um, you're going to have to figure out which one you would rather have it at. I would say probably from Daystrom's website. But again, this is where everything is always gets kind of murky when you go from one person doing it to another person, and there's a lot of wiggle room here, especially when we don't see it actively doing some of this stuff, but we're just speculating. So just leaving it in those regards. We do have a nav computer, which does make all the sense in the world, especially for a Starfleet vessel. Maneuverability is a 2D plus 1, so just a little bit above our galactic standard. Space speed of 9, so this does really work for an interceptor. And atmospheric speed is 1,150 kilometers an hour, so still relatively fast. A hull of 3D and shields of 2D. Not the most robust, but really not the weakest either, because our standard TIE fighter is a hull of 2D, no shields. We're 1D stronger than a TIE fighter. Plus, we also have the shields available, which is really nice. Okay, I see some other things that are going to be different here in the near future, but let's get on to our sensors. This is not this is what we have listed here. This isn't something that we typically see from Daystrom. So passively, we can scan out to 5 kilometers with a 1D plus 2 bonus. We can do an active scan out to 12 kilometers with a 2D plus 1 bonus, an active search out to 16 kilometers with a 2D plus 2 bonus, and a focus at 500 meters with a 3D plus 1 bonus. Now, Daystrom said it had 4 Type 5. We have listed here 3 Type 5 phaser arrays. Fire control is a plus 2. Uh, Rate of fire is 2, and damage is 5D. But now here's another little change. This has got 3 micro torpedo launchers, where we only had 2 before. Let's see. And this is a little bit more on the combat side. So this might be more of a combat version or a torpedo boat version of it, if you want to think of it in that regard. Because we do have fire control of 0D, but we do have a spread of 5 at 2D plus 1 damage. And they're saying it's got about 150 micro torpedoes in all. So that sounds more like a torpedo boat to me, kind of like the old PT boats. All right. We also have 2 class beta tractor beams. Fire control is 0D. Strength is 5D plus 2. Quarters, we have 5 Spartan quarters, and 10 decks. So I guess with that being seen that way, we have what? Um, I don't know if they're saying that they're essentially double bunks. So however you work it, you're going to have room for maybe 10 people to sleep, so your passengers can sleep while everyone else is working. Uh, I don't know, just putting it out in that regard. It might even be triple bunks in there because it's a smaller ship. Hard to say. Let's see. We have one deck, 10 escape pods with capacity for 4 people. Seems a little extreme to me, but that's what they have listed here. We have one personnel transporter for capacity of 4 personnel. We also have 10 probes. And the write up that we have, the Federation mission scout ship is a type of Federation scout ship in operation during the late 24th century. The Scout was a single pilot runabout sized starship with a forward mounted cockpit separated from the rest of the vessel. At 24 meters, it was slightly larger in size than the Type 11 shuttlecraft and carried dual mounted phaser banks, the photon torpedo tubes. The vessel is accessible through its docking hatch on the ventral hull. That comes from Star Trek Insurrection. Really, I think they wanted to limit the size because, I mean, you're working on a budget saying, hey, do you come up with the complete interior of the vessel or do you just have just that small amount of area? You know, however you want to look at it, really. Um, Me personally, I think that it was just their way to have a smaller area for the shuttle. Um, Probably seeing that there was a door there that you'd just go straight through it, but just trying to limit the production costs instead of having to make an entire interior for a shuttle that you're only going to see briefly. How do you work that out? So I do understand that. Some of this I would probably change here if I was going to actively do it. Is I would put this back up to a 4 phaser arrays, knock this down to 2 micro torpedo launchers, much like what Daystrom had put on there. Maybe about 30 micro torpedoes. I think 150 is a little excessive. Um, I do like the ship mass from Daystrom being at about 80, 83 metric tons and probably about 125 metric ton of cargo capacity. Um, still makes a lot more sense than 1,250 metric tons. I just don't see the actual size in the ship to be able to pull that off. Uh, just my viewpoint of it. So, really, kind of a Star Trek version of what the Millennium Falcon would be in so many ways, which is perfectly fine. We need ships like this. The hardest thing is, in my mind, and I'm going to kind of say it in this regard, some of the things that are broken in Star Trek is the fact that we were using replicators so much in the next generation. And now that we have replicators that are big enough to actually manufacture shuttles on the whim, um, really things are kind of getting broken. Um, because you don't really need transport ships so much like what we see in Deep Space Nine, where you had Captain Gates that Captain Cisco uh, kind of started having a relationship with, and the fact that she had to run supplies. Well, if you have a Federation ship there, you can just knock out whatever supplies you need as long as you have enough just general matter for it to convert into whatever you needed. I think there needs to be a little bit of limitation as to what it can and cannot do. But unfortunately, I think we've crossed that in the series where they can do almost whatever they want. Um, I'd like if I'm running this as a role playing game. I think I would knock that down just a little bit. I think you can make individual components, but you're not going to be able to build a whole ship unless you're building it piece by piece. But then you still have certain things that you're going to have to actually manufacture from mined stuff. Like we still need the lithium crystals and stuff like that. Technically, with a replicator, you could replicate one and it should work. But see, that's where things kind of get broken. How do you do it? Don't do it. You know, um, it all depends on the game master and the group of players in those regards. What do you accept and what don't you accept? So the other last thing I would change would be your warp drive speed. I like what we have from Daystrom being a warp 5 for standard cruise, warp 6 for max, and warp 8 for, what was it, 12 hours. I think that fits a lot better. Being a produced kind of a ship of the line as a small ship, I think that works out pretty decent. Uh, a little bit better than the 1.5. So I think you're always going to be trying to do the warp 3 for its maximum warp all the time. And yeah, I don't know. That's just my thoughts because you're going to want this for, like I said, a small crew running maybe even some patrol missions in a certain small area, or even running supply missions. But you still want to have a little bit of teeth so that way you can help defend yourself or defend others, like Starfleet typically does. So, with that being said, thank you so very much for joining me today. Thanks for listening to me rant a little extra. It's always wonderful having you here. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.